Okay, so this is a recording of my send of Supersaturated. This opening move, by the way, was brutal. I ended up losing the flash, almost tweaking my ring finger on that opening pocket, which is a little sad, you know. But so we end up with a red point here. But this was a really intense climb, about just shy of 100 feet, maybe 90, in that ballpark. I'm terrible with these estimates. These opening moves and pulls were actually fairly brutal, and maybe represented some of the harder moves. I would say the crux comes from just below a higher lip that we'll be approaching shortly. So this was my first trip outdoors, and I wanted to make the best of it. I wasn't really very familiar with a lot of the conventions of outdoor climbing, and I wasn't really comfortable with finding feet and mantles. End up in a lot of searches and trying to figure out how to progress from decent points of rest. Here's a good example, actually. But Supersaturated was my third climb on the trip, and I felt pretty well. Had some of the hardest physical moves of anything I sent during the entirety of my stay at Foster Falls. I greatly enjoyed this problem. You can see here I'm kind of skipping past the mantle and just coming up on the left side here because I'm just not yet comfortable with the idea of throwing that high foot and then rocking over. But what ended up happening with this climb was very satisfying. This interestingly has a wide range of debate on its overall grade. The initial ascent supposedly called it 11B, 11C, and then the guidebook called it 10C. And so Mountain Project said, "Oh, screw it, we're gonna take the middle range, and we're gonna call it 11A, and you guys can decide what you think it is." I will say I found it personally tougher than the 11A that I flashed before this, which was called, I believe, Pillsbury. You can see me flailing around here a lot more. um, these pulls were awful. And my right hand is on that side pull there, and it doesn't want to go. I think I end up committing something along those lines, but by really emphasizing that underhand cling on the left, and then making kind of a desperate step up. I really wasn't sure that this move was going to go when I finally do decide to pull on it. And it was maybe the crux for me personally, I would say. I, yeah, I would say it was easily the most intense move on the climb for me. So I finally, commit. We're gonna pull, and it's kind of an awkward step up, but it goes, and suddenly I feel a lack of resistance, and I break through the tension. Can't quite figure out where I'm going from here either, and I have some concerns because it's a little bit of a pumpy position. So I start kind of looking rapidly to find something, and I finally get my hand around a pretty, if there is such a thing as a juggy crimp, this was it. Pretty nice and solid. And it allowed me to work through. Ended up doing another cross and then pulling up to the main shelf here. So, Supersaturated has this beautiful shelf line, about a third of the way up it, maybe 2/5. I don't know, I'm terrible with these estimates. But you just get to kind of sit and shake out your arms and get rid of a lot of your pump and that lactic acid buildup. I took, mind you, we're fast forwarding through a lot of this here now. But I took no less than 5 minutes just shaking everything out that I could and just making sure that I was ready for the next big trek of the climb, because there's not really a ton of meaningful rests in these positions, sadly. Um, but basically, yeah, it was a really beautiful day. I think about 70 degrees out in the falls. And the mornings were a bit cold, I admit. I think it's worth noting that, man, the view up there was just spectacular. I I mean, it was beautiful, the way the sun was breaking over the trees and light was kind of filtering down onto the rocks. So, I eventually got back to it, kicking out, the rest of that lactic acid. It was, pretty big climb ahead, and I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. I just knew that the last, uh, ideal rest was now behind me. Getting up to the next clip section is not too bad. Basically staircase and a jug hall. Um, but then climbing up into this next section is fairly challenging. It's kind of like a small fissure that you have to wedge into to get any meaningful pull upwards. Slow and steady though, and it does, go with a little bit of effort. I found some solace in this right rack formation over here. Was looking for something a little bit better. Ended up getting this, but as I started pulling up into this position, um, it didn't feel good from that left side, so I leaned back into it a little bit and just tried to kind of utilize that weight to find a nice pull. As I leaned into this, my belayer warned me that I was starting to push a little bit off route, and I was like, oh, damn, okay. So that kind of gets rid of that plan, and I ended up traversing back to the left immediately, getting over to the proper here, and then grabbing and pulling through on this section. This honestly eased up quite a bit from this point forward, but I will say, I don't know that it mattered that much. By this point, I was I mean, classic boulder endurance, right? But I was running out of stamina on this, and I was starting to have trouble closing my hands, which is, last I checked, highly problematic to completing a climb. So this last section was honestly rather juggy, but it just didn't matter anymore. And I really started having to dig a little bit deeper just to pull off of these basic holds. I think I burnt out the last of my main energy, taking one last hard pull to kind of sling my feet up. Nice grip here on a decent hold. I understand that it's a lot harder to see them now. And then this is right here. Yeah, the last big push to kind of get up there. I'm just shaking my hands out, taking anything I can. Um, I know that the end's in sight. I can see my anchor right there. And so I take one last breath, shake out one last time, make a big throw, catches onto another jug, lucky dice. Come on over, end up just getting into position and slapping my anchor. I think I toyed around for a little bit up there, just kind of looking at other holds and kind of the top ledge section. I was pretty jubilant to just kind of be through it at this point. It was really brutal, and yeah, that was Supersaturated in Foster Falls. What an amazing climb and great experience all around.